There we go.
That's about it for me. I got.
All right. Skip, what say you? What was Tet?
All right, so how many are familiar with what Tet is? Tet is the Chinese New Year, and it's celebrated at the time in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, of course, and China. So that was their New Year, and if anyone sees the Chinese New Year's calendar, it begins, I believe Tet is normally in February. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone here? So, Tet of 1968 was the kickoff of the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong to hit these areas, in which the battle for Hue was conducted, which to the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong was a victory. They were able to infiltrate, get down and dirty, and take over Hue for quite a number of days. Now, getting back to my first time when I got to Vietnam, I landed in Cam Ranh Bay. I was drafted in 1967. I did not enlist. I was a replacement. Back in the day, during Vietnam, units would go intact, and then throughout our time there, they would start bringing in replacements to each unit in Vietnam. So I came in Cam Ranh Bay, spent a few days there. They put me on bunker line detail with an M14, 2 magazines, which for some of you who don't know what a magazine is, it's where the bullets go in. And I was given 2 magazines. 3 of us were sharing 1 rifle, 3 magazines, and we were advised that if we get attacked, we could not load and fire until the officer of the watch came up to tell us. Wonderful. So after my start in Cam Ranh Bay, I flew up to Chulai to be a replacement in the Marical Division. The morning we landed there, the first thing the pilot of the C-130, who was an Air Force pilot, not the Marines or Army, advised us that Chulai airstrip was under fire. They were going to drop the back ramp on the C-130, and we were supposed to be nothing but elbows and assholes getting off the plane. I don't know if you know what that stands for, but that was kind of get off the plane at a very rapid speed and fall into the ditches on the side. After my welcome to Chulai in 1968, I was assigned to a small unit called F Troop, and we were 19 miles southwest of Da Nang. Since I had an interest in dogs and they were short dog handlers, I stepped up to volunteer to be a dog handler, and I went through a wonderful 21 days of OJT working with the German Shepherd. During my time there, I worked both with the Australians and with the Republic of Korean Marines doing patrols. My job was strictly scout dog. Scout dog handlers were always at the front when we were on patrol. I wasn't able to bring my dog home, and when you look at the stats, 3,800 military working dogs were left behind to be turned over to our allies, the Vietnamese, which, from what I've heard from other people, our dogs did not have a very gracious, honorable ending. So, here you go.
All right, Phil, I'm going to dim the lights because I'm going to show a couple of slides. The day after that really bad night where my unit was saved by rain, my orders came through from Command Sergeant Major William Woolridge, MACV. He had been Secretary of the Army, the senior non-com in the entire United States Army. And by God bless that man, he made me an Army News correspondent at the division level. Just as a footnote, after that service, and I was rotated home, a good-looking kid from Tennessee took over my job. His name was Al Gore. So I wasn't related to Command Sergeant Major Woolridge, but for whatever my skill level was, he severely overestimated it, and I was grateful. So real quick about what happened. We had the enemy in the rear. We decided to build a major base camp. This is where our incredible mechanistic enterprise comes into effect. We dig out that deep water basin off the Mito branch of the Mekong River. Imagine a river wider than the Ohio and far deeper. We dug that out with enough spoil to build 8 square miles of base camp. 8 square miles, 2,300-foot runway, every kind of attack helicopter in there, every kind of cannon, 105, 155, 175. We had mobile riverine. By the time that thing was put up, it looked like this, with 15,000 troops from the 9th Infantry Division. A kind of further aerial perspective, here's what it looks like today. This is off Google Maps. That basin is both a fish farm and a recreational fishing site. If you go to Vietnam, I recommend it. The fishing there is great. And the rest of it is kind of a farm of one sort or another. And I was operating on night ambush patrol originally to protect this base because it was mortared every single night. We had hot showers, we had a swimming pool, we had air-conditioned library, and we were mortared every single night of the war. So we're out here in no man's land at night with an incredible backup. We had hovercraft, armed hovercraft that could zoom over the plain of reeds, get anywhere, surprise the enemy in the rear. We had high-powered armored boats with big guns coming up the river fast. We had smaller boats with dual electrically operated 50 caliber machine guns in the front, usually one in the rear, coming up the smaller streams equally fast. I did duty on those part of the time. We had cannon on barges. We would tow the cannon up through the various waterways, and so we had artillery anywhere we wanted it on the waterways, and if we couldn't reach it by waterways, we brought that cannon in by helicopter. So our artillery base was constantly moving, constantly there in support. This is a picture actually of our Vietnamese allies coming out of a helicopter. It's not the helicopters we use, but I like it because it kind of shows what it was like when they dropped you right on top of the enemy, which happened to me. You jump off and you go to war. And this is what happens. This is a medevac, dust off, our wounded being carried off, but we had record life-saving soldiers surviving wounds, terrible wounds that had never survived anything like that before. In 20 minutes, they'd be in the hospital, and highly skilled physicians operating on them. So this is how Vietnam was characterized in the movie Apocalypse Now. Some of you may have seen that movie. Always brings a tear to my heart. The Ride of the Valkyries is playing. The colonel has turned it on from his lead helicopter, and this is that unit attacking again in the movie, a village. So what really did the Vietnamese see from us? They saw this. This is War of the Worlds, 1953. This is what we look like to them coming in with all this stuff. In the movie, Attacked by Martians, do we quit? No. We're enterprising, we're adaptive, we respond. What did our enemy look like against this? This is what our enemy looked like. And so, to me, the story here is that human ingenuity and human enterprise tends to defeat technology. And so as you go, many of you here are destined for military service. As you go into that service, do not underestimate your enemy. Do not overestimate your technology. The human ability to maneuver, defeat, outlast is just extraordinary. They had studied our playbook. They knew all about the Revolutionary War and George Washington. They knew we just would get tired and maybe run out of bullets and go home. And that's what happened. Gentlemen, who would like to go? Or should there be questions?
Yeah.
Definitely questions.
Come on, make one up.
Come on, there must be somebody here that may have a question. I see some older gentlemen here, if I may use the term loosely, that appear to also have spent some time in the military. Gentleman there, another gentleman wearing First Air Mobile and First Cav. Anyone else back there that, there's a gentleman over there back in the corner. I figured I saw some old salts walk in here just to see whether or not we were given a better portrait of what happened while we were there. going back to the job I had, my home base was LZ Baldy, which was close to the Laotian border. There were times we would go out on patrol from anywhere from 15 to 28 days and be resupplied by helicopter, or at least enough that you could pack your ruck to last you for a number of days. We would average one hot meal probably every 2 weeks if we were lucky. I myself had a pack for two. I had a pack for my German Shepherd as well as myself. I also had to carry an extra 200 rounds of M60 ammunition. We almost looked like we belonged to Pancho Villa, if you ever saw some of the photos of Vietnam with the bandoliers around us. Some guys had to carry an extra 81 millimeter mortar or a couple extra rounds, base plates, the tube, several M60 machine guns. But again, bottom line, we were out doing search and destroy, search and seizure missions, at least what I did as a grunt and dog handler. So there were times that inadvertently we somehow wound up in Laos chasing the bad guys as they were supposed to be. But majority of the time we stuck around the border, and my area again was also in the A Shaw Valley. Flare up.
In 1973, I was in the Marine Corps station in the Philippines, and we flew into Da Nang all the time. I was part of the air wing. 73 is considerably later than 68, 69, and I can remember that the whole atmosphere of what was happening in Vietnam had significantly changed by 1973. In 1968, I can presume that there was no end in sight, that it was full scale ahead, let's go. But by 1973, there definitely was an idea going on there that the war was going to end sometime soon. Nixon had came out and said peace was at hand in 1972, and so the whole environment, military environment over there, had changed from command on down. And one of the big things that I noticed changing was what happened when you came back in from the field. What happened in the hooches, what happened on base as far as activities went.
There was a lot of dope smoking out in the field,
we
a
get
lot of alcohol.
we get a picture here that it was, John Wayne gung ho, let's go, let's do this. The Vietnam I ran into was significantly different, more complex, let's put it that way. The drugs, the prostitution going on there was a huge issue with what was going on with the...
That was all going on. But you also have to take into account the war came home every night at 6 o'clock news.
If
It
I
was the
would have
first
been,
war.
if I could have finished exactly what I
Yeah,
would have said there.
this was the first
But-
war where it came home. I know you want to get your 15 minutes in, but
No, don't assume that.
the situation
Don't
is
assume that. I want to make sure that the picture is fully realized in its complexity. The people that I came home, that I saw come home, were messed up, not necessarily because they were out in the rice paddies, because they were hooked on drugs. They were hooked with prostitution. That whole social side of it is a significant thing that these people are going to have to contend with in their sense of command. That's all I got to say.
Well, this is a very important point, and everything this gentleman says is absolutely true. The drug use went rampant after Nixon announced he'd pull out the first 25,000 troops. Hanoi realized that we were going to move out. Hanoi in '69, when we were all there, was really ready to call up and sue for peace. We dropped more bombs on them than in all of World War II, on one country, than in all of World War II. We had all this firepower that I showed you. We had these MAP teams in place. We were winning over hearts and minds. And, but we didn't know it. Walter Cronkite of CBS News said the war was unwinnable. I think that was '68. Lyndon Johnson didn't go for re-election, Nixon won. He felt he had a mandate to wind down the war, so that when you were there and your contemporaries were there, they all felt that this was just something randomly imposed on them in their life. They had to survive Vietnam. There was no real purpose at that point. By the 70s, there was no real purpose. You might as well get high. Far different than when we were there. My unit carried an AK-47. You were on drugs in the field, we shot you in the foot. We medevac you out. And by God, we did it. So there were no drugs in our unit.
That's true. That wasn't tolerated, especially in the field.
But it really went to hell in a handbasket into the 70s. And, you know, I have terrible feelings, terrible empathy for the addiction that formed coming back from all that. It was an entirely different kind of war, and one about which one would be incredibly confused. And it really defined veterans of the Vietnam War because of all of the media coverage of that addiction. But it also produced what we saw in the Gulf War I and today, the best military in the world, because the junior officers trying to cope with that totally reformed the military and started an entire different way of training, a different relationship with the troops, a different sense of the mission. Today, when people get out of the military and they come back into civilian life, they often find they miss the military because civilian life has no mission and there's no one at your back. You're on your own and nobody gives a damn. In the military, everybody cared for you and you cared for them. And so this terrible thing that you described in Vietnam went on through revolution to produce the military we have today. Yes?
I was one of the people watching Walter Cronkite on the 6 o'clock news, and I was also in Ann Arbor and saw the turmoil that occurred here in Ann Arbor, and
You
so I
don't look
just,
that old.
yeah,